Hi, come on in out of the snow. Happy 2020 by the way, unless you're watching this in the far future, in which case I hope 2020 was okay. I hope you didn't make any stupid mistakes that year, if only because if you ever regret anything you do this year, you will never break free of your friends joking that hindsight is 2020. If you're new here, this is a festive best-of from the first two series of Yesterzine, YouTube's 5th most popular magazine retrospective show. In each episode, we take an issue of a gaming magazine from the Golden Age and play the best and worst rated games in that issue to see how well they do now. And there's always a cover feature, where something from the magazine reminds us of how gaming has changed since magazines were the only way we learnt about new games. But first, some highlights from those gaming heavens. It's also gorgeous even now. It's bright, clear, and fast. Partially helped by using a half-screen play area in single player with a large map at the bottom that's actually very helpful. It looks simple these days, but it does not look bad, and unlike so many other games of the time, the graphics never get in the way, especially when it's as smooth as a well-lubricated butter slide. Guys? What are you doing? Guys? I did a full 48-team cup tournament in this game. During that, I had a game where I took the lead, the opposition had a player sent off, I got complacent, conceded 2 goals, and then spent most of the game chasing the comeback. The only goal I conceded in the first 3 rounds was to the worst team, resulting in a very nervy end to a game I should have won comfortably. I won one game thanks to a dodgy back pass from the CPU. I scored a couple of rebound goals. And I eventually won the final, an El Clasico derby, with a breakthrough goal in the 87th minute, just as I was resigning myself to a replay. Anyone who has watched football will have seen and lived through all of those scenarios, and they all happened in one half-hour tournament. It'd be a GTA heist mission, but without having to get involved in a play-to-win shitfest, whose mystifying and irritating success is the reason why I'm not playing GTA 7 right now, and why we can't have nice things. Fat Worm blows a Sparky. Well, isn't this a classic case of thinking of the name before you did anything else at all? I'd love to see a remake of it for modern machines, but that's a little unlikely because of what happened to Jarell. You see, they got old. Like all of us, when we reach a certain age, we were forced to mature and get a proper job. About a year after this game was released, having released 19 games for various machines, Jarell sold their back catalogue to Elite, had a midlife crisis, and went off to make financial and insurance software. No, seriously, they're still around today. The founder, Robert White, is still in charge, although nothing on their website gives any clue as to what they did in their hedonistic youth. I guess most of us would like to forget our teenage years when we're trying to be taken seriously. There's 2 ways you know how old Wolfenstein is. Firstly, that it's such an early 3D game they felt it necessary to put 3D in the name. And secondly, because it's not, in fact, 3D. There's no height to anything in Wolfenstein 3D. The game takes place inside buildings with all the meaningful character of a new build housing estate. Everything is the same ceiling height, there's no stairs, and not even lifts other than between maps. Ah, you'll say, but they solved that in their next and most famous game, Doom, didn't they? Well, no, I'll reply, wondering how you got into my house in the first place. Doom, despite adding stairs, lifts, and multiple height rooms, is held together by cunning artifice. Doom is also a 2D game. The engine can't handle floors above other floors, and the entire map can be drawn perfectly in 2D, as the game itself does. There's not even any way of aiming up or down in the original Doom engine. If you shoot something above you, the game just handles it. Which is why Quake is important. Like Mario 64, as we'll see later, Quake was not the first in its subgenre, but it was where proper 3D first-person shooters with the mouse and keyboard scheme we know today went mainstream. Playing Mario 64 again, I'd forgotten how much Mario Odyssey owes to it. And that's the best game on the Switch. Don't post web pages suggesting otherwise in the comments, by the way. Odyssey is the best, and no link is going to prove me wrong. But if that's what I'm stretching to for faults, then you can see Mario 64 is something very special indeed. Most series stumbled a little in their transition to 3D. Sonic, for instance, stumbled, fell down the stairs, smacked itself in the face on the wall, staggered sideways and then fell down another 700 flights of stairs. Mario doesn't. Mario 64, by comparison, slides down the banister, somersaults off the bottom and collects a power star doing it. Cannon Fodder's music was written by the late great Richard Joseph, who you all last heard being literally the only saving grace of Rise of the Robots. And his theme for The Nearest Thing Cannon Fodder Has to a Menu is one of my favourite Amiga tracks of all time. Feel for me here, by the way. I had to deliberately sacrifice people to get that footage of the traps just now. I might never recover. I'm sorry, Stu. I never meant it to happen like this. The year is 2099. We are in the middle of an ice age because climate change went the other way thanks to a meteor strike in Myanmar somewhere around 2040, which was large enough to cause enough debris to essentially block out the sun. This is actually real science. It's called an impact winter. You know, just in case what you need right now is another thing to stop you sleeping at night. The ST version at least has a very solid frame rate. Bombing about the mountains on skis, it was genuinely fun, and in a snowmobile, even more so. And not least because, thanks to a control mapping mix-up, pressing the accelerator also fired a missile. Luigi must have been thrilled about this one, by the way. Nintendo later tried to get out of the whole Super Mario Brothers thing by retconning Mario to also be their surname, and claiming it covered both of them. But here, that won't wash. This is a game only starring Luigi, but named after Mario's first name. I can only assume Luigi got a new agent by the time of Luigi's Mansion and the 2013 Year of Pretending to Care About Luigi. The few of you who watched the embarrassingly unpopular Yesterzine Extra about Cryo's Dune adventure game will remember it was developed at the same time as an internally competing project called Dune 2, a real-time strategy game. That game is credited with mainstreaming real-time strategy games as a genre, just like I'm trying to mainstream mainstreaming as a verb. It was so pioneering in the genre that developers Westwood had to come up with a name while trying to explain it to the press. Co-founder Brett Sperry and his team went through several combinations of war, strategy and real-time while attempting to define what it is they were doing. One of the major innovations that Command & Conquer became known for were its video-based cutscenes for intro and story clips between missions, most people's first in a mission-based game. Perhaps an inevitable evolution after the video footage-based games like Night Trap, people started looking for ways to integrate full-motion video properly, and Command & Conquer was one of the first to do it. We're lucky on Yesterzine to have some fantastic contributors to call on, all of whom can do such flawless impressions of game developers, journalists, and in one memorable case, a game manual, that I bet you didn't even realise they weren't the real guys. So it's with some trepidation I play Death and Return for the first time in 2019, especially given the tremendous kicking Tony Mott gave it for Superplay in this issue. It scored a barely visible to the human eye 29%, and Tony had the following to say.
Mr. Dustman, you forgot this when you collected from us this morning. Take it away, it makes me very unhappy.
There's a little more to this one though. To explain more, we called Clue 3 the game's designer, Kazunori Yamauchi. And after comments such as, "Why are you ringing me?" and "It's 2:30 AM, can't this wait?" he offered the following thoughts.
Basically, we're not trying to fake reality. I'd rather create the sensation of handling a remote control car, but with the kind of dynamics that you'd expect from a real car. The car's suspensions actually work. We've attempted to simulate the dynamic forces as they go around corners.
It might all have blown over at this point if, when the preview copies went out, acting editor Stuart Campbell hadn't used a section of the contents page where magazine staff put faintly humorous quotes in order to say,
Old soldiers, I wish them all dead.
And hide the Legion's name in the credits section as conscientious objectors, which, to be fair in this case, is very literally true. But I think we need one more expert opinion, so I put in a call to Lorfarius, host of the Amiga Rama podcast, and a man who has played more Amiga games than I've got Sexiest Man in Britain awards.
I covered Cannon Fodder many moons ago over on the Amiga Armor podcast, and I've got to say that it's a stark contrast to its reputation. It's a fun, wild and humorous take on what I could only call the action war game. It puts everything else to shame for its time, and I only wish that it didn't have the world's most unfair midsection on its 8th mission, which I'm sure scared away just as many fans of the game as it did its haters.
Beyond that, I think we'll leave the last word on Cannon Fodder to its own manual.
And on a more serious note, don't try playing this at home, kids, because war is not a game. War, as Cannon Fodder demonstrates in its own quirky little way, is a senseless waste of human resources and lives. We hope that you never have to find that out the hard way.
And it's surprising if B-movie violence led both to the creation of the US Games Ratings Board and to Sega pulling the game from circulation. Nonetheless, in 25th anniversary form, you can play it today on all the current consoles. Times change.
Night Trap will never appear on a Nintendo system.
The graphics from the original, not the updated version of the original, but the original, dear God. They are some people's idea of a dream when it comes to pixel art, and my idea of some sort of chaotic hell. And the guys are slow. I remember them, you'd go around a corner and someone would attack you really quick, and you're like, I had to react. And I think I have the same idea in Wolfenstein and Doom when I was playing those at the same age. It was just like quite intense. You're in a dark space, you're walking around, and then people keep attacking you, and you have to move really quick. What I do remember mostly with Quake is playing in death matches, lots of death matches, often with people who were far better Quake players than me, and running around in these death matches and being killed really quickly and having to respawn and then being killed again. Go, okay, everyone, we're just going to go crowbars only to try and even it out from people who had better guns. And that was way more fun, that idea. And I think it's something MMOs have captured now that we actually had in the 90s and I'd kind of forgotten about.
The work they'd done on RPG Eye of the Beholder was a key inspiration, and Brett described the original kicking around of ideas for the game.
This is how many of my visions for a new game start. It's always, what if you had this and that, or wouldn't it be hellaciously cool if...
It's a game I'm always happy to see on retro gaming sets, and the first game I ever completed, although not in an era of 100%ing. That's not to say it doesn't have its issues. The rules of physics never seem to apply, and you always seem to be surprised when they don't.
The game's scriptwriter Ken Melville was not so kind looking back about the decision to reduce the video to 64 colours and reduce the bitrate to make it suitable for Sega's single-speed CD drive.
All our video had to be tortured, kicking and screaming into the most horrifying, blurry, reduced colour palette mess imaginable in the Sega CD. I shudder to think about it.
The reviewer for PC Zone on this one was one Charlie Brooker. Yes, again, that one. It's quite a month for celebrities on Yesterzine, isn't it? Charlie started at PC Zone and was there for several years. And unsurprisingly, when something was an utter pile of sheep shit, he didn't tend to hold back. In this case, a review with an extended metaphor involving a toilet. He's not a fan.
A perfect example of nothing at all, with nice FMV bits in it.
To find out what happened, we called founder Steve Blank, and after questions like, "Why are you ringing me? It's 2:30 AM, can't this wait? And you think I sound like Bloggo's what?" He had the following to add.
We raised $35 million and after 18 months made the cover of Wired magazine. The press called Rocket Science one of the hottest companies in Silicon Valley and predicted that our games would be great because the storyboards and trailers were spectacular. 90 days later, I found out our games are terrible. No one is buying them, our best engineers started leaving, and with 120 people and a huge burn rate, we're running out of money and about to crash.
It's amazing what you'd forgotten had changed. What was a story, and what was ever a thing when you read old gaming magazines. Here's some of the ones we remember fondest. In 2019, we get edgy if a game comes out in the UK 3 days after our fine friends across the pond get it. In 1994, that would be near unimaginable. With delays for translation, for conversion to our better but slower TV system, and just for weird licensing reasons, games would often be this delayed. Secret of Mana is by Square, more famous for the Final Fantasy series, but the first one of those that even got to the UK was the 7th. And even then it was a full 10 months behind the Japanese release, and 2 behind the US. Final Fantasy III didn't find a UK release until a Nintendo DS port in 2007, 17 actual years after it was produced. Plus, of course, I'm 13 at this point. I had a console or two, but games for those were very much restricted to lucky birthday and Christmas gifts. PC and Amiga games, having tinier media costs, could be had cheaper when a few months old. But even so, it's not like I could be down Future Zone every week getting something new, which made demos important, and the only way to get those were on magazine cover discs. Not only were they my only real chance to truly test what I was about to spend my limited funds on, a lot of the time they were really the only new thing I had to play full stop. I mentioned back in the piece on They Stole a Million that it had 2 separate pieces of loading, and it occurs to me this might be lost on some of you. After all, in 2019, no game loads everything on startup, it streams it off the disk, or has loading delays between races, between areas, or between levels. And this is fine. It doesn't require you to do anything, you just have to wait an extra 10 seconds while it loads Kratos' nipple textures or something. Back in 1986 though, games came on cassette tapes. They took 5 to 10 minutes to load. You've been watching that darts game 180 load since I started this section. It's literally just audio data being fired at the computer. Once you'd had enough Spectrum games, you actually started to learn which bits were graphics and which were level data, for instance. Like, most of this has just been loading a picture for you to look at while it loads the rest of it. Here's what it sounds like when it's loading and gets to the colour data. If you've ever played and enjoyed a Gran Turismo game, get yourself a copy of this. While it's 10 tracks, 5 characters, and slight arcade sim identity crisis means I'm not going to debate the 3 out of 5 CVG gave it, it's absolutely worth you going and getting and educating yourself on a game few will ever play, but all 85 million people who have ever bought a Gran Turismo owe a debt of gratitude to. This game is an excellent practical demonstration, in fact. Here is the back of the box for the Commodore 64 version of Chase HQ. Notice the nice colourful screenshots. Notice the phrase, fastest, most thrilling. Then notice that tiny note at the bottom, screenshots taken from various formats. They don't look especially beyond the capabilities of a well-driven 64, and that note is tiny, so I wouldn't blame your average 10-year-old for believing them. Here's a nice zoomed-in shot of those pictures you based buying the Commodore 64 game on. And here's the game. Yeah. It did, at least, give us a great pub quiz question. What was Sony's first games console? Most people will say the PlayStation. People who think they're clever will say this, which was also called a PlayStation, and which we'll be covering in an episode or two's time because it's a hell of a story. It wasn't released though, and so isn't the answer either. This is the answer. The Sony Intelligent Discman. A portable CDI. A machine whose popularity will simply let be described by the words super rare appearing 9 times in the first 4 rows of Google image results. Night Trap was somewhat different. A game in which you're a special agent keeping watch on a teenage girl's slumber party because there are some conventions we're damn well going to follow here. Your job is to switch between all the cameras and activate traps when danger appears. Danger mostly consisting of, and I invite you to remember the beginning of this paragraph at this point, vampires. Sony's board still didn't get it. But when Nintendo were looking for a response to the then forthcoming Mega CD, Kutaragi and Oga took the call. They signed a contract with Nintendo to produce a CD-ROM add-on for the SNES, and crucially, rights to launch their own Sony-branded all-in-one system that would play SNES cartridges, as well as the new CD-based SNES games on a format they named Superdisc. Development went well, and in June 1991 they were ready. At the Consumer Electronics Show, Sony were ready to unveil the device, which by then had a name. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you the Nintendo Sony PlayStation. The launch 3DO was only made by Panasonic, with LG, then known as Goldstar, and Sanyo models to follow, and in late 1993 the need for Panasonic to manufacture cutting-edge hardware, not only at a profit, but at enough of a profit to cover the license fee, meant that the recommended retail price for a 3DO in the United States was $700, about 4 times the launch price of the SNES, or Mega Drive, or 3 Atari Jaguars. 2 things were needed: a graphical operating system that everyone could use, and a unified driver model, so games wouldn't have to individually support every combination of hardware out there. We had Windows 3.1 of course by this point, but it wasn't designed for games, which always tried to bypass it and use the direct access to the hardware that MS-DOS allowed. The perils of this were neatly demonstrated when some arcane hardware on compact Presarios running Windows 3.1 caused Disney's Lion King game to constantly crash. This problem was made somewhat more serious because Disney's Lion King game was included free with compact Presarios. Of course, they can't all be winners. We also look at the worst game in each issue. Sometimes they've pleasantly surprised us. Other times they were these games. In part 1, you trudge across town trying to find out where the villain of the week is hiding, while not losing too much energy to accidentally walking through buildings, and for some reason still being shot by the military, who have apparently not got the memo that you're the good dinosaur. Tesserae? 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 Teasmade is a puzzle game involving coloured tiles. That much I can state with certainty. Much more, though, is going to involve us diving into this. The in-game manual has 15 pages of instructions. 15. No game that isn't trying to intimately simulate the space shuttle should need 15 pages of instructions to understand the basic concept. There is one thing absolutely wrong with Teasmade, and you've been hearing it for a couple of minutes now. This really is the entirety of the music. Okay, I've pressed literally every key, and nothing is happening. This calls for drastic measures. I'm going to go get the manual. Well, this isn't a great sign. The text instructions are 31 kilobytes. The game is 28 kilobytes. The instructions for this game are literally bigger than this game. Also, the instructions I've got hold of look like this. I think we're going to need that technical difficulty screen again. Right, let's try and do a fighting. It's the battle phase, and we need to hear battle sounds. Now, let's give it its due here. Those were absolutely battle sounds. Because here's what happens if I leave the settings on their defaults, start a game, enter a fight, and simply hold the joypad up and right and the single fire button down. It's not learning a hell of a lot, is it? And this opponent actually does better than several others. Here, for instance, is number 2. Enjoy the shadows clipping through his cowering form, by the way. Here's number 3. Actually the hardest opponent in the whole game. You occasionally have to punch him to keep him trapped. This is the only one in the game that'll win if you do just hold up and right. Here's opponent 4. And 5. At this point, you'd fight those 5 again. Exactly the same rules apply. So here's the end boss. Surely she'll put up a challenge. Oh, never mind then. To jump, you press the C button. That's one of your buttons gone to control literally every 2D fighter I have ever played, mapped to up. Beyond that, you have a kick and a punch button. Neither of them are super effective. I got some traction with repeated crouch and throw type moves, but even then this game starts hard. Standard moves will be countered easily by Ian Monster here, who can pluck you out of the sky like that other, legally distinct monster does with planes. The thing is though, I think this pile of crap has a legacy. This is the PC box art. Look at Tully's train-like truck flying down the magnetic rails. This is a concept image of Elon Musk and Tesla's Hyperloop magnetic high-speed train. It's the same bloody thing, isn't it? And, of course, you will quite sensibly say, well, that's coincidence, isn't it, Dudley? I mean, this is an incredibly obscure old PC game. Elon's a busy man. I doubt he's even heard of it. And you know, that's fair. So let's just sit back and enjoy the game's credit sequence. Oh yeah. Yes it is. Yes, that one. I bet you're feeling really stupid about that last comment now, aren't you? I see it's nearly the end of the show, but there's just time for a game of Your Mum's Songbooks. The plot, and plot is a strong word, revolves around taking control of Godzilla so you can guide him into town and fight some other monsters that are apparently even worse, such as King Ghidorah, Biolante, and Your Mum. If you don't know Micro Machines, then they were these tiny little toy cars, maybe half the size of a normal small toy car. If you can't picture it, then basically imagine what a full-size car looks like next to Your Mum. That's how small they are. I've punched so many signs I've probably now got more wood than Your Mum. In order to enter the career mode, you have to enter your name. That's fine. We will of course be that experienced rider of things, Your Mum. It was a pack-in with the machine at times as well, thanks to it appearing on a couple of Sega's Mega Game compilation packs. The carts on eBay are cheaper than Your Mum, and just like her, you can save money by going for a loose one. Now though, it's a different story of course, because what you do is play any of the 5 Mega Drive FIFAs, at least 4 of which are more common than Your Mum's phone box adverts. In return, there would still be software licensing, but the rate would be about $3 a unit, somewhere around a fifth of Nintendo's charge on a full price game, and nearly as cheap as Your Mum. It has the effect of changing your tactics. The work required to build an army larger than Your Mum means that you do tend to go for the higher value units just to have less downtime, as you're often a little bit busy when panic building. Yesterzine returns in 2020, but in the meantime, why not watch Original vs Remake on What Should I Play, or any of the specials? Or give yourself severe head trauma and just watch this episode again. Either way, may your 2020 be at least marginally less bad than you think it will be. I believe in achievable New Year's wishes. Happy 2020, y'all!